Well, hello, this is Dick Mitchell from St. Mark's Episcopal Church. This is going to be the second of 4 programs on Holy Land pilgrimage. Today, we're going to talk about Galilee. Last week, we talked about history and geography. The third program will be on Jerusalem. And the last program, the fourth program, will be on other sites in the Holy Land. Today, I will largely focus on Galilee. But before we do that, I simply wanted to observe that this past week, we have all been horrified by the outbreak of violence and brutality with the Hamas attack on Israel that brought about the deaths of at least 1,200 Israelis and yet another round of war in the Holy Land. Americans have died, hostages have been taken, airline travel into Israel has been disrupted, and daily life in the Holy Land has changed completely. Frankly, it is difficult even to discuss Holy Land pilgrimage under such circumstances. Now, the areas in which we have traveled, those areas are some distance from Gaza, but Israel is a small country, and many places are near other places. There will someday be an end to this round of fighting and violence, and yet I have no doubt that pilgrimage travel to the Holy Land will be impacted for years after. The war that was launched this past week will put an end to pilgrimage, tourism, and leisure travel to Israel for some time to come. In fact, both the Israeli and West Bank Palestinian communities depend heavily on tourism, particularly Christian pilgrimage. During the Second Intifada of 2000 to 2005, and during the pandemic lockdown of 2020 and 2021, pilgrimages and tourism simply ceased, and the local economies suffered greatly. Tourism and tourists are essential to the regional economy. Now, if you tour the country in an organized tour, which I suggest, you will almost certainly have an experienced tour guide, plus a bus driver, and they know where and when to travel, and they keep an watchful eye on the surrounding circumstances. The current image is a photo of Osama. Osama was our 2022 guide. He is an excellent guide. He is an Arab Christian and Israeli resident. But the way things are breaking now, Osama may well be out of work for months, indeed, possibly even years. But we are a people of faith. Let's keep hope alive. It may not be this year or next year, but pilgrimages will once again blossom in the Holy Land, as they always have, in spite of the long history of wars and violence that have troubled this part of the world. So having said that, I will return to my description of the Holy Land. There is a long-standing Christian presence in the Holy Land. The local Christians will tell you that they have been there all along, that their heritage dates back to the primitive New Testament church. Historians believe that at the time of the Crusades in the 12th century, the majority of local inhabitants still remained Christian, and the balance did not tip to a Muslim majority until later centuries. Many indigenous Christian people have used family or commercial connections to migrate to the West, often to the United States, so that there has been a constant drain on the local Christian population. Today, only about 2% of the population of Israel is Christian, and almost all of them are Arabs. Now, the largest Christian denomination in the Holy Land is Greek Orthodox. That is the heritage tradition, loyalty to the patriarch in Constantinople, dating back to loyalty to the Roman emperor in Constantinople. Now, there are also Roman Catholic, Anglican, Syrian, and Protestant congregations. When Westerners began regularly appearing, often creating local institutions in the Holy Land, particularly in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, Greek church folk often joined up and became Catholic or Anglican or Lutheran, and so forth. I don't think the local missionaries converted many Muslims. I've been told that Greek Christians simply became Western Christians. Now, if the largest denomination in the region is Greek, how come that Roman Catholics seem to end up with the biggest churches at the most prominent locations? I suspect that just has something to do with wealth and power politics. Moreover, in the Middle Ages, after the Crusaders had been kicked out of the Holy Land, the Pope designated the Franciscans, the Franciscan order, as the custodians of the Holy Land, perhaps because they were respected by the Muslims, and today Franciscans still maintain several dozen Holy Land sites in the region. Now, there is an independent local Anglican diocese. It is called the Episcopal Diocese of Jerusalem. It is part of the Anglican Communion. It's not part of the American Episcopal Church. It's part of an independent province. It includes parishes in Israel, in the Kingdom of Jordan, in the West Bank territories, and also in Lebanon and Syria. In fact, it is highly unusual because this diocese crosses national boundaries. Virtually every other Anglican diocese in the world is confined to a single nation. Now, in the Holy Land, the Anglicans' first language is Arabic. The services are conducted in Arabic, and Anglicans identify themselves as Arabs or as Palestinians. The seat of the diocese is St. George's Cathedral, a handsome Gothic church just north of the walls of the old city of Jerusalem, and we attended Palm Sunday services there in 2012. Moreover, there is an American support group for the diocese. It is called the American Friends of the Episcopal Diocese of Jerusalem. It regularly solicits financial support for the Jerusalem diocese and sponsors visits to and from the Jerusalem diocese. So if we're going on a pilgrimage, how in fact do we know where we're going? How do we know what is what? Well, certain locations have been known continuously since Jesus' time. Obviously, Jerusalem, it's always been there. Similarly, Bethlehem and Nazareth, Bethany and Jericho are known locations. Capernaum, Caesarea on the coast, and Caesarea Philippi up in the hills are known archaeological sites. However, some locations are just conjectural. The location of Emmaus, or Cana, or Bethsaida. And some places just move around. Jerusalem has occupied the same set of hills for more than 3,000 years, but the walls of the ancient city have not been permanent. so that what was once inside the city may no longer be, and what was once outside the city may now be inside. So let's look at the specific tour to the Holy Land. The major access point to Israel is its Ben Gurion International Airport in suburban Tel Aviv. Now, we flew nonstop from Dallas to Tel Aviv on United Airlines. If you connect, you may change planes in Amsterdam or in Paris. After your arrival in Tel Aviv, you will likely leave by bus, certainly so if you are part of a tour. Many Christian pilgrimages then head toward the North Country, toward Galilee. My view is that many tours begin in Galilee in the north to build up suspense and excitement over visiting Jerusalem at the end of the trip, and also to mark Jesus' own transition from his Galilean ministry to his passion in Jerusalem. Now remember, Galilee is the north section of Israel, and of course, the land in which Jesus was reared. It was called Galilee in the Gospels. It's still called Galilee today. In Jesus' time, Galilee was probably considered a backwater, that the capital and leading cities of the Jewish countryside were in Judea, in the south. Jerusalem and the surrounding communities, along with additional towns on the Mediterranean coast. Folks maybe joked about Galilee in the same way folks might joke today about West Virginia. Even Nathaniel quips, "Can anything good come out of Nazareth?" And the Southerners perceived that natives of Galilee spoke with an accent, and we know that from the gospel story of Peter's denial of Jesus. Now, Matthew, in the gospel, Matthew spoke of Galilee when he quoted the prophet Isaiah, who prophesied a blessing upon this northern land. The land of Zebulun and the land of Naphtali, that's the north country that is now the Galilee. The land of Zebulun and the land of Naphtali toward the sea, across the Jordan, Galilee of the Gentiles. The people who sat in darkness have seen a great light. And for those who sat in the region and the shadow of death, light has dawned. Of course, the major pilgrimage site in Galilee is Nazareth. And in this talk, I want to focus first on Nazareth and second on the Sea of Galilee. Those are the two major pilgrimage destinations in Galilee. Nazareth was Jesus' hometown, but it was then only a minor village. Jesus was known as Jesus of Nazareth, and Nazareth has long been a Christian site. No one ever had to find or locate Nazareth. It's been continuously occupied and identified from Roman times. Because of its identification with Jesus, and because it is an obvious pilgrimage destination, it has today become a major city of more than 100,000 people who are overwhelmingly Arab and largely Muslim. It is an integral part of Israel. It is not a West Bank community. Now remember, today, Israel itself is about 20% Arab, and Nazareth in the north is in the heart of Arab Israel. So, question, what major biblical event or miracle took place in Nazareth? Yes, the appearance to Mary of the archangel Gabriel to announce to her that she would be the mother of the Son of God. Now, the Roman Catholic tradition is that this angelic visit took place at Mary's home, and tradition has located that site, and a massive Roman Catholic basilica has been built there. In fact, it is today the largest Christian church in the Holy Land. This massive mid-20th century church built in the heart of Arab Israel. The building itself surrounds the small vestibule or grotto that is understood to be Mary's home, where the archangel appeared to her. The church has handsome stained glass and dramatic and even unusual architecture and statuary. It is a definite pilgrimage location. This is a striking church, but there is an element of Western domination here, perhaps even arrogance, with this massive Western church in a largely Muslim community. Now, by way of contrast, the Greek tradition is that Gabriel appeared to Mary while she was at the town well, so that there is a much more modest Greek Orthodox church straddling the town well several hundred yards uphill from the massive Catholic basilica. The town, which is spread out, bustling and lively, has several various Christian churches and institutions. In 2012, we stayed at a guest house of a French Catholic order known as the Sisters of Nazareth, just down the street from the Great Basilica. Now, downstairs and underneath the guest house, archaeologists discovered a set of original rock-cut tombs sealed by a great stone. We were permitted to visit. These date from the time of Jesus. They're authentic. They're not reproductions. I took this picture. You can see the great stone there by the door. And then I advanced to that door and took an interior picture showing the alcoves where the bodies were placed. This is, in fact, an authentic duplicate of the Jerusalem tomb as described in the Gospels. Now, from Nazareth, you can travel 20 miles east to the Sea of Galilee, the large freshwater lake that is part of the Jordan River system. Nazareth has an elevation of about 1,000 feet, but the Sea of Galilee is 700 feet below sea level. Ancient peoples fished on this lake, and you can still fish on the lake. The Sea of Galilee is an Israeli lake. Israel controls the entire lakeshore. In Jesus' time, the largest city on the lake was Tiberias, a Greek city named for a Roman emperor. And it was also the capital city for the Tetrarch Herod Antipas, who put John the Baptist to death. The city Tiberias is not mentioned in the New Testament, but the city is still there. It is still called Tiberias, today largely a resort city for Israeli Jews. The best-known New Testament city on the Sea of Galilee is Capernaum. Capernaum was the fishing village that Jesus used as his Galilean headquarters. Today, it is an excavated ruin, including a large synagogue that dates from a century or two after Jesus. There are your happy pilgrims. This is an illustration of the excavations. This is an image of the synagogue, another image of the synagogue. And finally, an image of the excavation in the foreground and then the specific synagogue in the background. In addition, the Roman Catholics have found and excavated a house that they claim was Peter's house. And above Peter's house, they have built a massive, ultra-modern church above the excavation. The church dominates the location. To me, it looks almost like a UFO hovering over the excavation. That's an exterior image of the church. Here is an interior image. You can see there's an opening there in the center in which you can look down on what is, we're told, is Peter's house. On each of our pilgrimages, we did a boat ride on the Sea of Galilee. A boat ride is standard on all Christian programs. The sea is a lovely lake with a little development around it, and it's surrounded by dramatic hill country. There is a good deal of agriculture, probably just as in Jesus' time, with rolling hills covered in fruit, vegetables, and so forth. A prominent hill on the sea and not far from Capernaum is known as the Mount of Beatitudes. Now we are speaking of the Sermon on the Mount, as was described in Matthew's Gospel. Now, this mount is not a mountain as we use that term. It's just a lovely hillside flowing downhill to the lake with a handsome church on top. In our 2012 trip, we ignored the church and we walked down the hillside. And here's a picture of the hillside with the church on top. In our 2022 trip, we visited the church. It sits in a handsome garden with striking views over the lake below. Here's the interior of the church. Now, whether or not this was the location of the Sermon on the Mount, I have no doubt that Jesus knew this lovely hillside. And it's very easy to imagine that he must have preached here or nearby at some point. Of the many sites around Galilee, perhaps this hillside is really the most special, the one that's really reminiscent of Jesus' life in this region. Now, the Sea of Galilee is surrounded by other Christian holy places. It is not unusual to see the local roads clogged with tour buses. On both of our tours, we visited this handsome 20th century Church of the Multiplication. This is a Catholic church that celebrates the feeding of the 5,000. Now, from New Testament descriptions, we think that this event, this miracle, took place in a much more remote location, but a Byzantine church stood at this site next to the lake, and it remains a holy place today. In addition, we have visited the church that marks the spot where the risen Christ commissioned Peter to feed my sheep, and we visited the excavations at the ancient city of Migdal, which we think is the home of Mary Magdalene. That's where her name comes from, Migdal. Both of those places, both the church of Feed My Sheep and the town of Migdal, are on the Galilean shore. Now, our 2022 trip included an excursion, an unusual excursion north of the Sea of Galilee into an area that in modern times has been called the Golan Heights, the mountainous area that Israel seized from Syria in 1967 during the Six-Day War and still holds. Indeed, it has effectively annexed it. This is part of the Middle East where the borders of Syria, Lebanon, and Israel converge. Indeed, our 2022 guide, Osama, pointed to a nearby hill just a couple miles away and said, "That's Hezbollah country." In these mountains, springs and watercourses flow into the Rift Valley, and they form the Jordan River. And the Jordan River then flows south into the Sea of Galilee. This hill country is quite lovely. It is very agricultural. It's probably well fortified, although we did not see any military installations. Now, up in this hill country are the ruins of the ancient city of Caesarea Philippi. Jesus retreated to this region, apparently after the execution of John the Baptist, and this is understood to be the location of Peter's confession that Jesus is God's Messiah. The city was, in fact, well beyond Jewish lands. It was named by Herod's son, Philip the Tetrarch, as Caesarea Philippi, naming it both after the emperor Caesar and after himself, Philip. Its older name, however, was Paneas, P-A-N-I-A-S, Paneas, in honor of the Greek god Pan. We saw the remnants of the shrine in honor of the god Pan. And here is our tour group looking along this shelf along the cliffside at the shrine and looking particularly at the ominous cave we see in the distance, seeming to be an opening to the underworld. Remember what Christ's words were? You are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades will not prevail against it. Well, this cave may well have been the gates of Hades and the inspiration for our Lord's promise. Now, another additional traditional location in Galilee for Christian pilgrimage is Mount Tabor. There are several New Testament mountains. I tend to get them confused. Mount Tabor is a standalone mountain about 5 miles east of Nazareth. It rises some 1,500 feet above the countryside. This, Mount Tabor, is the traditional location of the Transfiguration. Our full-size bus drove up only about halfway to a holding area, a small parking lot, where we were met with smaller step-on vans, each holding about a dozen people. Then the drivers of the step-on vans wished up narrow, twisting mountain lanes to the top. And somewhere along that road, I took this photograph, just looking over the side of the road to the village below. Up on top of Mount Tabor sits, of course, a distinctive Catholic church, a Franciscan church. Now, we visited Mount Tabor on a Sunday morning. We celebrated the Eucharist in a handsome outdoor chapel, and then appreciated views of the vista from atop there. This is looking out from Mount Tabor. In addition, down the hill from Nazareth, in another direction, several miles north, lies the Arab town of Cana. This is the reported site of Jesus' miracle of turning water into wine at a wedding, his first miracle. Now, let me hasten to add that the location of the town is disputed. There are several candidate locations. The site we visited is the one endorsed by the Catholic Church and by, of course, the tourist guides. And although Cana is an overwhelmingly Muslim community, and Muslims do not drink alcohol, nonetheless, wine shops dot the tourist areas. Furthermore, there is a lovely 19th century Catholic church, again Franciscan, called the Wedding Church. And the visitors are encouraged to use the church to renew their own wedding vows, which several of us did on our 2022 tour. Leaving the Jewish and indeed Christian sites at the end, let me just say, if you travel around the Mediterranean, and if you have an eye for history, you will come across many remnants of the Roman Empire. That empire lasted in many places, including the Holy Land, for some 700 years and left its mark through its buildings or ruins. So there are Roman structures and ruins throughout the Mediterranean basin, including the Holy Land. Now, just several miles north of Nazareth, maybe a couple hours walk, is the hilltop town of Sepphoris. It is now a great excavation site. In fact, it is an Israeli national park. It was in Jesus' time a Greco-Roman town with Roman roads and buildings. So there is a Roman road, another view of it, and an even closer view of the Roman-laid road. It also had stunning mosaics. And here is a famous mosaic of a handsome lady. I think she's called something like the Princess of Sepphoris. This was, in fact, the leading Roman town in Galilee, and it was just a walk from Nazareth. Jesus or his brothers or his father may well have worked there. So when people suggest that Jesus could not have spoken Greek, well, I'm not sure. There must have been Greek speakers in Galilee. Two of Jesus' disciples, Andrew and Philip, had Greek names. Now, we visited Sepphoris on both of our trips. It is a handsome hilltop excavation. There are vistas in all directions. And up on top, there's even a Crusader tower you can climb. In addition, both the Gospels and Roman historians speak of a region called the Decapolis. Now, that is a Greek word meaning 10 cities. These were 10 Greek cities, mostly dating back to the Hellenistic era, that the Romans recognized as independently governed, and they were independent of Herod's Jewish client kingdom. Most of those cities were east of the Jordan River, today in Syria or in Jordan. But one of the cities is in the southern part of Galilee, just west of the Jordan. It has the ancient name of Scythopolis. It is adjacent today to the Jewish village of Bet Shean. But Scythopolis hosts an incredible set of ancient Greco-Roman ruins, many dating from Byzantine times, when it was apparently a Christian community. We were pleased to tour the city and see these ruins, which are certainly extensive. So this completes my discussion of the Galilee. My plan is that next week, in the next program, we will cover the city of Jerusalem, and the entire session will be devoted to Jerusalem. Thank you and good day. Bye-bye.